There's something I want you to understand today that can radically change your life to the impossibility. But let me tell you, focusing on your problem only gives that problem power over you. But what if I told you that there's a greater power available to you, one that can shift the very course of your life, one that will cause you to rise above every obstacle you face? Today, I want to show you the secret to overcoming every challenge. Focus on the God power, not the problem. You are about to discover the key to victory. And I promise you, if you stay with me, your life will never be the same. So what we choose to focus on determines the reality we live in. Focus on your problem, and you'll be overwhelmed. Focus on God's power, and you'll rise above it. It's as simple as that. The key to victory is not to deny the presence of challenges, but to choose where you place your focus. God's power is not limited to what we see in the natural world. God is omnipotent. He holds all power. That means no problem in your life is too big for him. No mountain too high, no storm too fierce, no giant too strong. His power transcends time, space, and every limitation we encounter. So when you focus on your problems, you elevate them. They become giants in your mind, blocking the view of your God who is far greater. Fear and anxiety settle in, and it becomes easy to feel helpless. But the Bible calls us to be bold, to rise above our circumstances, and to know that we serve a mighty God who is greater than anything we face. Consider the moment when Peter walked on water. When he focused on Jesus, he defied the laws of nature. But as soon as he turned his attention to the storm, he began to sink. This is a powerful lesson. Focus on Jesus and you'll walk on water. Focus on the storm, and you'll sink. The power of God has the ability to make the impossible possible in your life. You might be thinking, that's good for Peter, but what about me? Let me remind you, God's power is available to you right now. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That means whatever you're facing today, God has already equipped you with the power to overcome it. You don't have to rely on your own strength. Prayer connects you to God's limitless power. When you pray in faith, you activate his promises in your life. Jesus said in Mark 11:24, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Prayer is the key to unlocking the supernatural power of God to work on your behalf. Your perspective can change everything. 2 Corinthians 4:18 teaches us to fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is seen, but on what is unseen. You must look beyond your circumstances and see with the eyes of faith. When you focus on the power of God, you begin to see possibilities instead of limitations. Today, I urge you to shift your focus. Refuse to be overwhelmed by your problems and instead focus on the greatness of God. His power is available to you. When you focus on God's power, no problem is too big, no obstacle too strong. Your victory is assured when you shift your gaze from your problems to the power of the Almighty God who is ready to move on your behalf. You can overcome anything. Focus on the God power, not the problem. You are about to discover the secret to overcoming every challenge in your life, the key to unlocking divine strength and breaking free from the chains of defeat. This principle has the power to transform your situation, no matter how impossible it seems. But here's the catch: most people focus on their problems, allowing them to become giants in their minds. Every difficulty, every setback, every obstacle becomes a mountain too steep to climb. It's easy to let the weight of your challenges crush your spirit, to feel as if you are being overwhelmed by the circumstances around you. But I'm here to tell you that there's a greater force at work, a divine power that can shift the trajectory of your life in an instant. And that power is not in the problem, but in God. The truth is, what you focus on becomes your reality. If you keep looking at the size of your problems, they will keep growing. They will dominate your thoughts, your emotions, and even your actions. But when you shift your focus to the power of God, you are connecting to a limitless source of strength, wisdom, and authority that is able to transform your situation. This is why this message is crucial for you today, because the breakthrough you've been waiting for is directly linked to where you place your focus. As we dive into this principle, I want you to keep in mind that your focus is the key to your freedom. Stay with me throughout this message, because as we explore the power of God, you will understand that the key to overcoming every obstacle is not denying its presence, but refusing to give it the power over your life. This is the life-changing truth that can change everything for you starting right now. So what we choose to focus on determines the reality we experience in life. Focus on the problem and it will consume you. It will overwhelm your thoughts, cloud your perspective, and drain your energy. The problem will grow larger in your mind, becoming a giant that you cannot defeat. But when you choose to focus on God's power, your perspective changes. You begin to see your problems from the vantage point of a mighty, all-knowing, all-powerful God who is able to do the impossible. The power of focus is so significant because it dictates how we approach life. If your focus is on your own abilities, you may feel powerless in the face of life's challenges. But when you focus on God's power, you tap into a strength far greater than anything within yourself. You realize that you don't have to face life's struggles alone. God is with you, and His power is available to you. In every situation, we have the choice to either focus on the problem or on the power of God. The moment you shift your focus from the problem to the power of God, you align yourself with His divine ability to move mountains, calm storms, and heal brokenness. This shift in focus doesn't just change your perspective, it activates the power of God in your life. And that power, when activated, will bring breakthroughs, peace, and victory. This is the reason why it's so important to train yourself to focus on God's power, no matter how big or small the problem may be. Your circumstances may seem insurmountable, but with God, there is nothing that is too great to overcome. When you choose to focus on Him, you choose to operate from a place of divine strength and purpose, not from a place of fear or inadequacy. So when life throws challenges your way, remember this: it's not the size of the problem that determines your outcome, but the size of the God you choose to focus on. God's power is not limited by time, space, or circumstances. Unlike the limitations we face in the natural world, God's power transcends everything we encounter in life. His power is not confined by human understanding, nor is it restricted by earthly challenges. When you focus on God's power, you are acknowledging that He is not only present in your situation, but He is the source of everything that exists. And He has the ability to change any circumstance at any time. In the Bible, we are reminded that God's power is immeasurable. Ephesians 3:20 says, "Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us." His power is greater than any problem you may face, greater than any fear, greater than any obstacle. No situation is beyond His reach or His ability to change. This is the foundation of our faith, the belief that God's power is boundless and accessible, no matter the size of the challenge in front of us. When you focus on God's power, you begin to see your life through a different lens. Instead of focusing on the limitations of your resources, your strength, or your knowledge, you begin to focus on the unlimited power of God. His power is at work within you, enabling you to accomplish things that seem impossible in the natural realm. This is not about your own ability, but about tapping into the divine resources that God has made available to you. The Bible is full of examples where God's power surpassed natural limitations. Consider how He parted the Red Sea for the Israelites in Exodus 14, how He made the sun stand still for Joshua in Joshua 10, or how He healed the sick and raised the dead through Jesus. These are not isolated events, they are testimonies of the infinite power of God that is still at work in the world today. When you focus on God's power, you are reminded that you are connected to that same limitless power. This is the essence of faith, believing that God, who created the heavens and the earth, is more than capable of handling any situation you face. He is not limited by time, space, or circumstances. His power is eternal, unchanging, and all-encompassing. Focus on that power and you'll begin to walk in the confidence that no problem, no matter how big, can ever stand in your way. Focusing on your problems doesn't just magnify them, it paralyzes you. When you direct your attention solely to the difficulties in your life, you allow them to dictate your emotions, your thoughts, and even your actions. Instead of seeing solutions, you become consumed by the size and scope of your challenges. Fear, anxiety, and hopelessness begin to take root in your heart. And what once seemed manageable suddenly appears insurmountable. The more you focus on the problem, the less you see the possibilities for a way out. The problem with focusing on problems is that they have a tendency to control you when your eyes are fixed on them. They cloud your judgment, distort your perception of reality, and hinder your ability to move forward. When you become consumed by the weight of your problems, you lose sight of the truth that you have access to a power far greater than any challenge you could face. This is a trap that many fall into. We become so focused on the obstacles in front of us that we forget about the resources available to us. We look at our own abilities or lack thereof and we begin to doubt. We question if we have enough strength, enough wisdom, enough resources to make it through. But when we focus only on the problem, we ignore the fact that God is bigger than any obstacle we face. Our strength is insufficient, but His power is more than enough. In Psalm 121:1-2, David says, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. David's focus was not on the mountains he faced, but on the God who made the mountains. When we focus on the problem, we limit ourselves, but when we focus on God, we open the door to limitless possibilities. Shifting your focus away from the problem and toward God's power changes everything. You move from a place of weakness and fear to a place of strength and confidence. When you stop allowing the problem to dominate your thoughts and instead place your focus on God's promises, you invite His intervention into your situation. The problem may not disappear instantly, but your perspective will change, and with that change comes the power to face anything with courage and determination. So stop allowing your problems to control your mind, your emotions, and your actions. Shift your focus from the obstacles to the one who can move them, from your own limitations to the limitless power of God. When you do, you will begin to see your challenges for what they really are: temporary circumstances that are subject to the authority of the Almighty God. When you focus on God's power, you are placing your trust in something that never fails. God's power is not subject to the winds of time, circumstances, or human error. It is constant, unchanging, and eternal. This is why focusing on His power gives you an unshakable foundation in times of uncertainty. The world around you may change, your circumstances may shift, but God's power remains the same. When you align your mind and heart with His power, you are tapping into a source of strength that can never be exhausted. A source that is more than capable of seeing you through any trial. Too often we rely on our own strength or the strength of others. We place our trust in our skills, our intelligence, or our resources. But these things, while valuable, are limited. So when we face a challenge that is beyond our ability to control, we quickly realize how fragile our own power truly is. However, when you focus on God's power, you are no longer relying on your own frail abilities, but on the limitless might of the Creator of the universe. You consider the story of Peter walking on water in Matthew 14:22-33. When Peter fixed his eyes on Jesus and stepped out of the boat, he was able to walk on the water, defying the laws of nature. But the moment he took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the wind and the waves, he began to sink. This illustrates the truth. When we focus on God's power, we are able to rise above our circumstances, walking in the supernatural strength He provides. But when we shift our focus to the problems around us, we become overwhelmed and sink under the weight of fear and doubt. This is why it's so crucial to keep our eyes fixed on God's power, not just when things are going well, but especially when challenges arise. The moment we take our eyes off Him and start to focus on the magnitude of our problems, we are walking away from the very source of our strength. But when we focus on God's power, we are reminded that there is nothing too difficult for him. He is able to handle any situation, no matter how impossible it seems, and he is more than capable of providing a way where there seems to be no way. When you choose to focus on God's power, you acknowledge his sovereignty and his ability to make all things work together for good, even in the midst of difficulty. You place your faith not in your own ability to solve the problem, but in his ability to bring resolution, peace, and victory. And with that shift in focus, you tap into an unshakable confidence that no matter what happens, God is in control and his power will see you through. So when you focus on God's power, you shift from a mindset of defeat to one of victory. Our natural response to challenges is often fear, worry, or even resignation. It's easy to feel defeated when we are confronted with a problem that seems too big, too complex, or too overwhelming. The circumstances may scream at us that there's no way out, that we are powerless against the forces at play. But when you focus on God's power, you begin to realize that the very things that seem insurmountable are not too difficult for the God you serve. God's power is not just for the grand, miraculous moments that we read about in the Bible. It is meant to be applied to every area of our lives. The same God who parted the Red Sea for the Israelites, who healed the sick and raised the dead through Jesus, is the same God who is at work in your life today. His power has not diminished. It has not become outdated. It is just as powerful now as it was thousands of years ago. And that power is available to you. When we focus on God's power, we are reminded of his promises. The Bible tells that God is for us and that he will never leave or forsake us. In Romans 8:31 it says, if God is for us, who can be against us? This powerful truth shifts our mindset from one of fear to one of confidence. We are no longer looking at the problem with a sense of helplessness. Instead, we are looking at it through the lens of God's ability to overcome any obstacle. In moments of trial, we can either let the problem dictate our outlook, or we can let the power of God redefine our circumstances. When we fix our eyes on God's power, we start to see with the eyes of faith. Instead of seeing ourselves as victims of our circumstances, we begin to see ourselves as victors, empowered by the same strength that raised Jesus from the dead. This shift in focus changes everything. It moves us from a posture of defeat to one of victory, because we are no longer relying on our own strength, but on the supernatural power of God. Victory is not just about overcoming a problem. It's about understanding that God's power is at work in us and through us. It's knowing that no matter how fierce the battle may be, we are never alone. God is with us, empowering us to rise above every challenge, and through his power we can face any trial with confidence and assurance. When we focus on God's power, victory is no longer just a possibility, it becomes a certainty. When you focus on God's power, you align yourself with his will. And this alignment opens the door to divine intervention. God's power is not just for overcoming challenges, it's for guiding you toward the purpose and destiny he has designed for your life. By focusing on God's power, you place yourself in the position to receive not just the strength to endure, but also the direction needed to walk out his plan for your life. God's will for your life is bigger than any challenge you may face. When you align your focus with his power, you position yourself in the flow of his purpose. Instead of being tossed around by the waves of uncertainty and circumstance, you begin to move forward with clarity, knowing that you are being guided by the very power that created the universe. This is not simply about enduring hardship, but about moving in the direction that God has already prepared for you. In Proverbs 3:5-6, we are encouraged to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. When you focus on God's power, you trust that he is leading you even when the path ahead seems unclear. You trust that his power is not only able to move mountains in your life, but also to provide the wisdom and discernment you need to navigate through every season. The Bible is full of individuals who experienced divine intervention when they focused on God's power and aligned themselves with his will. So Moses, for example, was given the strength and courage to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, not because of his own abilities, but because of God's power at work in him. When Moses focused on God's power, he was able to stand before Pharaoh and confront one of the greatest empires of the time. This power didn't just give him the ability to overcome obstacles, it gave him the wisdom and the authority to carry out God's plan for the nation of Israel. Similarly, when you focus on God's power, he equips you to fulfill your purpose. Your problems may seem like roadblocks, but God has a way of using even the toughest challenges to fulfill his ultimate plan for your life. When you align yourself with his power, you are allowing him to guide you to places of victory and fulfillment, even in the midst of difficulty. The problems you face are not the end. They are part of the process that God is using to shape you into the person he has called you to be. This is why it's so important to focus on God's power. Not just when things go wrong, but at all times. It's through focusing on his power that we become aligned with his will. And as we do, we begin to walk in the strength and guidance needed to fulfill the purpose he has set before us. With God's power, your path is not one of confusion, but of divine direction, leading you toward the destiny that God has already prepared for you. When you focus on God's power, you move from a mindset of self-sufficiency to one of complete dependence on him. In our daily lives, it's easy to fall into the trap of relying on our own abilities, our knowledge, and our resources to solve problems. We often think that we can handle things on our own and that with enough effort or strategy, we can overcome any obstacle. But this mindset limits us because we are relying solely on our finite strength rather than tapping into the infinite power of God. God's power is meant to be a source of provision and strength that transcends our limitations. It is not designed for us to depend on ourselves, but to trust in him fully, acknowledging that we cannot do anything of lasting value or significance without his help. When we rely on our own abilities, we will always come up short. But when we rely on God's power, we tap into an unlimited source of strength, wisdom, and guidance that can carry us through any situation. Jesus himself teaches us this principle in John 15:5 when he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. This verse highlights the importance of remaining connected to the source of all power, God himself. The branch is powerless without the vine, and in the same way, we are powerless without God's power at work in our lives. The more we focus on his power, the more we acknowledge our dependence on him, and the more we invite his strength into every area of our lives. When we shift from self-sufficiency to dependence on God, we open ourselves to a life of greater peace and confidence. The pressure to make things happen on our own fades away because we recognize that God is in control. Our efforts become an act of cooperation with his will, rather than a burden of trying to solve everything ourselves. This change in mindset allows us to walk through life with a sense of calm assurance, knowing that we do not face anything alone. God's power is there to carry us, guide us, and empower us to do what we cannot do on our own. Furthermore, relying on God's power helps us to experience his provision in ways we may never have imagined. When we trust him to meet our needs, he opens doors that we could never have opened on our own. He makes a way where there seems to be no way, and he provides for us in unexpected ways. This is the beauty of depending on God's power. He is always more than enough. And he works in ways that far exceed anything we could plan or expect. So the more you focus on God's power, the more you move away from trying to control everything yourself and begin to experience the freedom that comes with true dependence on him. This shift in focus not only allows God to work in and through you, but it also positions you to see the miraculous unfold in your life as you trust him fully to meet your every need. So when you focus on God's power, you position yourself for a life of supernatural possibilities. The moment you stop magnifying your problems and start magnifying the power of God, you open the door to miracles, breakthroughs, and divine intervention in ways that surpass human understanding. God's power is not limited by the laws of nature, by time, or by human limitations. It operates in realms far beyond our comprehension and can transform the most impossible situations into testimonies of his greatness. In in Ephesians 3:20, the Apostle Paul declares, "Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us." This verse highlights the incredible potential of God's power within us, potential that we often fail to tap into because we are too focused on the problem at hand. But when you shift your focus from the challenge to the Creator, you position yourself for immeasurable outcomes. God's power is not just about solving a problem, it's about bringing you into a realm where nothing is too difficult for him, where you begin to see supernatural possibilities unfold before your eyes. When you focus on God's power, you stop limiting yourself to human solutions and start to expect divine solutions. You no longer measure your ability to overcome a situation based on your own strength or wisdom. Instead, you begin to recognize that the power of God within you can accomplish more than you could ever imagine on your own. This is a mindset shift that changes everything. It moves you from living according to the natural realm to living with an awareness of the supernatural resources that are at your disposal. God's power is not reserved for a select few, it is available to everyone who believes. When you focus on his power, you activate that divine potential in your life. You may not see the full scope of God's plan in the moment, but focusing on his power helps you trust that he is at work behind the scenes, orchestrating everything for your good. It enables you to believe for miracles, to trust for the impossible, and to step out in faith even when circumstances suggest otherwise. As you continually focus on God's power, you will begin to see more than just the solution to your current problem. You will see doors opening in ways that you never expected, opportunities that were once closed being made available, and blessings that come in abundance. Your life will reflect the supernatural possibilities that are available when you live fully aligned with the power of God. So let this truth settle in your heart today. When you focus on God's power, you are tapping into a resource that is beyond human comprehension.